next month, I'm revealing my age. I graduated from high school, and I used my graduation money to buy Carolyn an engagement ring. I know, right? Wasn't that much. It was like $500. But anyway, so I remember I had the ring. I'm planning when I'm going to propose to her. I'm excited. And I had this gut feeling that it wasn't time to do it, which seems so conflicting because I'm like, I love this girl. I know I'm going to spend the rest of my life with her. And the Lord just was like, it's not time. Sure enough, I held that ring for 5 months until the Lord gave the green light, and we came back during Bible college break, and I decided to propose to her. I felt a peace about it. I called her dad. I got everything set up, and my plan, because at the time I was 19, before the week I turned 20, we got married. I thought, I know what to do. It's going to be elaborate. I'll make her breakfast in bed, and then at the end, I'll be like, one more dish, will you marry me? And so, I'm doing all of this, and I get to my girlfriend's house at the time, Carolyn, and I was so nervous that my father-in-law had to make the breakfast. So that felt good. But anyway, so I see Carolyn, I walk into her room, I'm like, good morning, sweetie. And she's like, what are you doing here? Making you breakfast in bed. And we start talking, and it's wonderful. And then she's like, I look so bad. I'm like, you look beautiful. And she's like, well, whatever you do, just don't propose to me if I ever look like this. Like, that actually happened, right? And I thought, nope, I'm going to move on with it. So went to the next dish, and I'm like, I got one more thing to give you. And I hope you're hungry, because it's sweet. And I open the little top part, and the ring is revealed. And I said, Carolyn, I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? And the first thing she said was, did you ask my dad? And then I'm thinking, no, he's tied up upstairs, so we can not conceal our love anymore. Yes, of course I asked your dad. She said yes. We start all the kids upstairs, all of our siblings are screaming because they know it happened. Everyone's congratulating us, and she's calling family, and she's like, John proposed to me. I said yes. And I'm just like, man, I just can't. I revealed to my wife that I had the ring for 6 months and that I was going to propose to her. And she said, if you would have asked me when you got it, I would have said no. Which, again, some of you are like, that reveals a lot about your relationship. But the fact of the matter is, the Lord was speaking to her in ways and helping her think through things in terms of what she wanted to do. And so, if I tell this story, she's always like, why do you tell him I would have said no? You need to explain why I would have said no. She would have said no because in her mind, she had some ideas of what she wanted to do with her life. And the Lord was working on her heart through that process. And then sure enough, when everything happened, that peace in my heart, now is the time, and everything transpired the way that it did. And it really comes down to this. Timing really is everything. And I'm saying it, and I can see some of your faces. Some of you hate that saying. It's an obnoxious saying, but it actually packs a lot of truth to it. And especially right now, guys, this is a season in my life right now where the Lord is teaching me that timing is everything. For all of you OCD, want to be in control of everything individuals, you know who you are. It's conflicting to just trust in the Lord, and that's all you can do is have faith that he's going to take care of it, and the timing is going to be perfect. Because in the text this morning, we're going to see that not only is timing everything, we're going to see God's timing is not sometimes, but it is always perfect. And we're going to talk about how God measures time and how we measure it. This would be perfect timing, but this might be God's better timing. All that stuff we're going to talk about. So let's begin in verses 1 and 2 of John chapter 7. It says this. Now after these things, Jesus walked in Galilee, for he did not want to walk in Judea because the Jews sought to kill him. Now the Jews' feast of tabernacles was at hand. All right, let's break these down, but the first three words that pop and should pop to you is the very first verse of the very first three words, after these things. Now that's an important phrase, primarily because John will use it numerous times throughout the Gospel of John and in the book of Revelation. He uses it 15 times just in this gospel account alone. So in the Greek, after these things, mete, taute, it means hereafter, it means afterward. After these things. So after what exactly? And I think most of us from the context would assume, well, it's after he fed the 5,000. We read about it, John, after walking on water, after the message we just learned last week at the end of John chapter 6, where he says, unless you drink of my blood and eat of my body, you'll by no means have eternal life. I'm assuming it's after these things. The problem is that there's a significant time gap between the end of John chapter 6 and the beginning of John chapter 7. In fact, we are talking about a 6-month gap just between the two chapters of the ending of the 6th and the beginning of the 7th chapter. So when we read after these things, it gives you a better idea, context of what we read in the 6th chapter. Listen to this. If we go back to John 6, verse 4, it won't be on the screen. We're told, now it was the Passover feast of the Jews, and it was near. That's the last thing we heard in terms of what the celebratory festival they were facing. Now, John chapter 7, the Feast of Tabernacles was at hand. Passover takes place in the spring or March or April time. Feast of Tabernacles takes place in the fall. So it's around October. It gives you an idea of the time frame that took place. And by the way, John's gospel is very selective with the stories that we see here. But what happened in that 6-month gap? In the other gospel accounts, it indicates they kept very busy, which, by the way, for those of you who forgot, Matthew, Mark, and Luke are synoptic gospels, meaning they give a synopsis of Jesus' ministry, where the Gospel of John, the main theme is focusing more on the person of Jesus Christ. And another fun fact, maybe some of you don't know this, the book of John covers 21 days of Jesus' 3.5-year ministry. In fact, 10 of the 21 chapters is devoted just to 1 week. And here's another crazy fact. 1/3 of the verses, 237 out of the 879, those verses cover a single 24-hour period. It's crazy, right? So we have the Gospel of John, gives us little accounts, and what's even crazier is that we're told in John chapter 21, verse 25, there are also many things which Jesus did, which if they would have all been written, I suppose that even the world itself wouldn't have room for the books that would be written. Meaning, there's things that we don't even know about concerning Jesus' ministry that's not recorded. And we won't know until we get to heaven. We have our eternal bodies, or when he returns, and we'll have this ability and knowledge to understand these things. But it's fascinating to me. All of this is fascinating to me. But back to John 7. We're told that Jesus walked in Galilee, and he did this purposely to avoid Judea, or as the text says, he did not want to walk there. And the reason for this is it's not because Jesus lacked courage and it was this political weird thing. He's like, I can't be over there. I don't have it in me to make it. He's not trying to avoid the region for fear reasons. Jesus, because of his foreknowledge, knew if he makes it to Judea, there's going to be a group of people there that are going to speed the process up of executing him. He knows he's going to the cross. The cross is on the horizon, but he knows that the timing isn't then, and they're going to attempt to do it. And he knew in order to fulfill prophecy, and he knew because the timing wasn't right, I can't go to Judea, which again, despite the saying that people hate, the timing is in fact everything. And that's exactly And I want you guys to, you might know that and you've known that your whole life, but if you're anything like me these last couple weeks, I've been wrestling with timing because I'm a very OCD, make plans for my plans kind of a guy. And this is a season of life that the Lord's teaching me to wait and to trust and to wait because his timing is perfect. Because he knows Jesus knows what's going to happen before it even happens. His foreknowledge allows him to know things that you and I don't know. And that bugs a lot of you because it bugs me. This is a safe place. We can share our feelings here. But anyways, it bugs me when I don't know certain things. I need to know certain things. But Jesus, he knows them before we even know them. Isaiah 46, 9-10 put it this way. Remember the things I have done in the past, for I alone am God. I am God, and there is none like me. Only I can tell you the future before it happens. Everything I plan will come to pass, for I do whatever I wish. This just gives us a glimpse of the sovereignty of God, his omniscience to know the outcome of all things, which is why Romans 8:28 is a good verse to hide in your heart. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. If you're a note taker, write this down. It's going to bug you, but here it is. You ready? God is purposely perfect with his timing. Something might happen in your life where you're like, well, that timing worked out for me, and you didn't plan it that way. It kind of like, some might say, it fell in my lap. But like, that doesn't happen with the Lord. He's purposely perfect with his timing. And for Jesus, he walked in Galilee to purposely avoid Judea because he knew his death was going to eventually happen, but that was not the time. Look at verses 3-5 because it's going to get deeper. His brothers therefore said to him, "Depart from here and go into Judea, that your disciples may see the works that you're doing. For no one does anything in secret while he himself seeks to be known openly. And if you do these things, show yourself to the world." There's a couple things I need you guys to understand concerning Jesus' brothers so that there's not a misunderstanding of what we just read. Essentially, Jesus' brothers in these verses are basically saying, you need to take your stuff to the big leagues. Like everything you've been doing, like we need a larger audience. Like all this miracle stuff, like let's go to Jerusalem. You will be famous. This is what we need to do. But the problem with Jesus' siblings is that they never seem to be supportive of his earthly ministry, meaning they didn't actually believe in the claims he made concerning himself. Did you know that? Because look at verse 5. For even his brothers did not believe in him. That seems backwards. So then why are they telling him to do all these things? Not only that, it seems crazy to me that the brothers who grew up with the Messiah, again, the Gospel of John has so much. All the Gospels give us a minimal account of what happened with Jesus, especially what's recorded between his birth, the time he got lost at the temple, to what we see in the text. We don't know a lot of stuff, but it's crazy to me that the brothers, that certain things didn't click with them, even with the miracles that he was performing. And yet, they say in verse 3, "Depart from here, go to Judea, your disciples can see the works that you are doing." But what makes that ironic, ladies and gentlemen, is that the brothers, the other Jews, they're heading to Jerusalem because it's the Feast of Tabernacles. What is the point of the Feast of Tabernacles? It's commemorating God delivering the Egyptians out of Egypt. It's a beautiful time to celebrate this amazing releasing them from an oppressive, evil group. And yet, they're rejecting the Messiah because it's our brother. There's no way. They didn't even believe him. The family wasn't supportive of Jesus, and Mark chapter 3, verse 21 proves my point. Listen to this. When his family heard what was happening, they tried to take him away. Look. He's out of his mind, they said. Let me translate to you that verse in John Geraci's rendition. You ready? His brothers thought, Jesus is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. He's been out in the sun a little too long, and they're thinking he's insane. He's out of his mind. They think he's crazy because the things they were hearing about during his ministry, of the miracles, of the healings, of the teachings. Did you hear what your brother Jesus said? No, what did he say this time? He said, unless we eat of his body and drink of his blood, we won't have eternal life. And it's like, yeah, about that. Like, do you have a sibling you have to explain things to people for? Like, sorry, he watches a lot of YouTube and he thinks he's smart. Anyways, you know what? When I was in high school, I would always have to preemptively warn my friends about my brother Anthony. Because like Anthony has this supernatural gift where he can find something about you and make fun of you like instantly. And like, you're like, ha 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 ha. But like, I would have to tell my friends like, so like, maybe don't talk because he will use that against you. Or if you do, you need to go toe to toe because Anthony doesn't back down. And then sure enough, it seemed like every time they would come up to me and be like, your brother's a jerk. Anyways, no, he's actually hilarious. So, but anyways, for the brothers of Jesus, they're wanting to pull him out. Even though they just said, take this to the limelight, they're essentially wanting to pull him out because they think something terrible is going to happen. They were worried that the Jews are going to try to kill him. He's saying crazy things. How did he multiply the bread and the fish? Wait, what do you mean he walked on water? But for Jesus, he knows what needs to happen. He knows what's going to happen before it even happens. Luke chapter 18, verse 31 through 33 put it this way. Then he took the 12 aside and said to them, behold, we're going up to Jerusalem, and all things that are written by the prophets concerning the Son of Man will be accomplished. For he will be delivered to the Gentiles and will be mocked and insulted and spit upon. They will scourge him and kill him. I mean, all of these things seem like a good reason for the brothers to pull him out. They think it's terrible news. That is until the end of verse 33. But on the third day, he will rise again. It's going to happen. I'm going to die. But I'm going to rise again. And honestly, I can imagine why the disciples, like Peter, will say things like, far be from it, Lord. Like, I won't let that happen. And the brothers are like trying to pull him out because they don't want to see their brother die. This devastating news. But this is what makes this so profound, the gospel, you guys. Because according to Acts 1:14, that they're all going to meet together and constantly unite in prayer along with Mary, the mother of Jesus, several other women, and the brothers of Jesus. They're trying to pull him out, and post-resurrection, they're finally gathered together. So, and I want seriously think about that. They doubt him, they don't believe him, he's out of his mind, but he dies, and then he rises again, and now they're uniting together. They're now followers of Jesus. They are now believers that he is the Messiah. I mean, what did it take for them to be convinced? Because it wasn't the 3.5 ministries that's recorded in the gospel accounts. It was the resurrection that silenced their doubt. Jesus rising from the dead validates his deity, and now the doubting family members are embracing their older brother as the Messiah. He is the light of the world. He is the bread of life. He is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. There is no salvation in any other name except the name of our brother Jesus. And I want you guys to think about this next question. What did it take for you to actually believe Jesus is God? What was in your life that caused you to say, I actually believe this? It's one thing you grow up in it and you're forced to believe in it because your families believe in it, but for you to articulate, understand fundamentally that my sins are forgiven and I actually want to serve my life for him. What did it take for you to be convinced in that moment? And for a lot of us, we could talk for hours about this, because for a lot of you, for some of you, it might be, I still don't believe. So then what would it take for you to believe? Because if faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, I have to not just magically believe, I have to believe based off of the transformation I've seen in other people's lives and my own life. But for the doubting brothers of Jesus, they wanted him to go to Judea, but it wasn't the time. Look at verse 6. Jesus even calls it out. Jesus said to them, "My time has not yet come, but your time is always ready." Again, I love taking little words in the Gospels and getting the Greek understanding of it. That word time, kairos, what makes it so fascinating is that it can be translated as opportunity. And now think about that in light of that. What a rich perspective in light of what we just read in verse 6. So let's reverse it. Jesus says, "My opportunity has not yet come, but your opportunity is always ready." And again, you know what he's referring to, right? My opportunity to go to the cross. It's not here yet. We haven't embraced it yet. My sacrifice is going to happen, but this is not the time. And that's really what it comes down to, ladies and gentlemen. He viewed the cross as an opportunity, not an obligation. Jesus didn't look at the cross like, let's get this over with. I'm not looking forward to it. Some of you have those adult responsibilities. We gotta go to the DMV. Let's get this over with. Even, you get to mail it now, which is great, but those things where you're just like, oh, being an adult's different. Maybe even right now you're thinking about that bedroom, that bathroom that is disgusting. And you're like, let's get this over with. Let's get this over with. My children haven't taken a bath in 2 weeks. We probably should do something about it. Let's get this over with. These painful reminders of these necessary, obligated requirements. But for Jesus, he didn't view the cross that way, you guys. He didn't, he viewed the cross as an opportunity to absolve the issue of sin. That's why when you read certain verses in the Bible, like for the joy set before him, he endured the cross because he knew it was the only way for you to be restored back to the Father. And so for Jesus, he knew that his opportunity had not yet come, and this is why he stayed in Galilee to avoid Judea. But look what it says in verse 7. He points something else out. "The world can't hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it that its works are evil." Now, this is an interesting statement because Jesus is going to tell the disciples something similar, but it almost seems contradictory to what we just read. John 15:18. Jesus says, "If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you." Now, wait a second. We just read in John 7:7, he tells them the world cannot hate you. And then in John 15, if the world hates you. So which is it? Is it if, or is it a fact? And the best way to understand this, and again, this is why we read through the Bible so that we can understand the context, because there is a proper context. The brothers of Jesus, even the disciples, they want to go to Jerusalem for the Feast of the Tabernacle. Nothing wrong with that. But Jesus knows if he went, they're going to try to kill him because the timing was wrong. So when it says the world cannot hate you, but it hates me, the world in the context of John 7 is referring to the hostile Jews that are looking for Christ, Jesus, to murder him, to rush him, to take him out. And Jesus even explains why the Jews hated him at the end of verse 7. Because I testify of it that its works are evil. And how did Jesus determine that their works were evil? By shining his light in the darkness. We read it a couple months ago, but John 3:19-20 says, "Light has come into the world, and men loved the darkness rather than the light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practicing evil hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his deeds should be exposed." Fun fact, Light exposes what's in the darkness. I've told this story before, but it's so disgusting and gruesome, I have to share it again. When Carolyn and I lived in the South, they had bugs there like we do here, but in the South, the humidity feeds their powers and they're ginormous there. We had a cockroach problem in our apartment before we had kids, and I remember I turned on the light and literally saw like 12 of them just like at the light and just like start scurrying away to the darkness. And you know that feeling when you just feel dirty after seeing something like that? It was just like this, no. It was awful. We took care of them, I think. Anyways, but the light exposes these vile creatures, and isn't it interesting, the vile creatures scurry to the very area that brings them security, darkness. When you think about this in light of who people are, when you think about it in light of the world, and I really want you guys to wrap your mind around what I'm trying to explain here. Do you ever wonder why people choose to reject the free gift of salvation? And you sit there and you're like, why does my brother not get it? My sister, my mom, my dad, my coworkers, and you're racking your brain with all these reasons why. And I want to help you guys think through this because I think a lot of you are putting pressure on your shoulders unnecessarily. It is people rejecting the free gift of salvation. It's not because they don't believe the gospel intellectually. And it's not even because they reject it philosophically. It's not because the gospel records historically inaccurate information. They don't even reject the free gift of salvation because of evolutionary purposes and positions or sexual preferences. According to Jesus, the issue of people hating the light is because they love the darkness. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this, and I want your attention as I'm explaining this, is because we weigh certain sins as being worse than the other. And then we focus on that, we hyper-focus on it. And really what it comes down to, ladies and gentlemen, it's not an issue of any of those things. It's because people love the darkness. And you need to think about that in light of who Christ is. Think about where you were and how you thought before you gave your life to Jesus. But some weird Western church reason, we think it's our job to save people. But it's not your job. Guys, I have everyone, you're all looking at me. It's not your job to save people. Not only is it not your job, maybe some of you are like, well, it's more than that. I feel like they just undermine my faith. Or maybe you feel like you're doing something wrong. And the reality is, if you are shining your light, if you're representing the truth of the gospel, it's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's because people love the darkness. And now your mind should be shifting in a different way, that you're putting unnecessary weight on your shoulders. Not to mention, it shouldn't shock you that people who love the darkness behave the way that they do. Like, why are they doing it? Guys, I've seen Christians assume it's their responsibility to change the lifestyle of an unbeliever. Then they can come to church before Jesus even transformed them, as if like your notion is like, if I can convince them to stop indulging in sin, maybe they can come to church. And what happens is that you, the Christian that might think that way, you didn't accomplish that. Like whatever tactic you had didn't work. And now you are mad at yourself. Maybe even mad at someone else because it didn't go the way you planned. But the reality is, it is impossible. You cannot convert someone to Jesus by the means of your ability. It has to be the leading of the Spirit, and no one comes to the cross unless they are broken. And not to mention, if they choose to reject what you're saying, it's because, according to Jesus, men and women love the darkness. And I think if Christians spent less time complaining how unbelievers behave, it would give us an opportunity to let our light so shine before men that they see our good works, but they glorify our Father as a result. It is not your job to change the person. It is your job to shine your light on the person. Represent who Christ is. Show fruit worthy of repentance. If you believe Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, then represent it with how you talk and how you live your life. Because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, that's your job. You shine your light. And by the way, Jesus is the one who said that. He said, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. He didn't say, you need to try to be more salty. You need to try to have a little more lumens in your light shining. Because this is he gave a fact. You are salt. You are light. And those two things have a single responsibility: adding flavor and preserving, shining your light. That is the main purpose of those things, to be salt of the earth and light of the world. If it's for any other reason, then it's pointless. I couldn't help but to think of my wife, Carolyn. In fact, I don't see her. Are you in here, my love? Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. Here we go. My wife likes to carry salt packages everywhere she goes. Is there any in here that loves salt so much you'd snort it if no one was looking? Yeah, you're in good company with Carolyn. She literally carries salt everywhere, and she'll add it. She'll be so happy, and then I don't look, and she adds it to her water, and she puts it in her eyes. Anyways, no, that doesn't happen. But I was thinking about that, in light of the Christian faith, I am salt, and either I'm adding, because that's the purpose of salt, flavor and preservation. And the way I look at this, we're fulfilling it or failing in it. There's no in between. We're salt and light. We are not the bread of life. And we need to stop acting like it's our responsibility. We can't change the person, only Jesus can. A nagging Christian has never converted someone to Jesus. And that's why just shine your light, love the person, not the sin, explain to them the wages of sin is death, but then give them the hope that Jesus gives the gift of eternal life. And that's exactly what it is. Explain to them in love that Jesus came in order to give them an eternal hope, that they feel lost, they're in the darkness. I love the darkness, and Jesus wants to expose the light so that they would find satisfaction in him and him alone. And ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, new tactic. You ready, Christians? Find people who love the darkness and shine your light on them and love them. And you're going to be uncomfortable. And you're going to walk through the mud, some pretty messy stuff in their life. But at the end of the day, that is the purpose of church. Because what happens when we don't have this place? You're still a follower of Jesus. So find the people who love the darkness and shine your light. Okay, I need to continue on. Here's my point to all of this. Jesus knew the people he testified against loved the darkness. But he also knew going to Jerusalem with his brothers at that moment was the wrong opportunity, because the Jews there had every reason to kill him, but not his brothers. Look at verse 8 and 9. Jesus tells them, you go up to the feast, because he's not worried about their safety. He said, I'm not yet going up to the feast, for my time has not yet fully come. And when he had said these things to them, he remained in Galilee. Now, God's timing is never too early, but at the same time, it's never too late. It's always perfect. Now, can you guys let me geek out just for a second, because I really can't help but to think of a certain movie written by a certain author named Mr. J.R. Tolkien. Wow, my brain just melted there. Did you see what happened? Help John. Anyways, I can't help but to think of the movie The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings. Okay, remember the opening scene where Frodo Baggins sees Gandalf come in, and then he sees him at the top of the hill, and he says, you're late. And Gandalf, with a very serious look on his face, says, a wizard is never too late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to. And then they both start laughing, ha 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 ha. And then, anyways, what if Jesus said that to his brothers right now in John chapter 7? The Messiah is never too late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely where he means to. This is where my mind goes when I study, so just thank you. I'm thinking about it because Jesus says in verse 9, I am not yet going up to this feast. He's not going to go up too early. He's not going to go up too late. He's not going to go with them in that moment because he knew by going with them, it's going to generate a crowd. But wait, look what happens in verse 10. it says this, but when his brothers had gone up, then he also went up to the feast. Whoa, wait a second. The end, don't worry. Not openly, but as it were in secret. He's pulling a covert Jason Bourne Mission Impossible. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. I've noticed when I'm around certain people, it generates more crowds. I realized growing up, when I hung out around this guy named Gino Geraci, people would go up to him and be like, hello, Gino, oh my gosh, Gino. And then they would look at my brother and I, and we're like eating a jar of mayonnaise, and we're like, hi. And they're like, this is your offspring? And he's like, yeah, it skips a generation. Anyways. I notice when I'm around certain people, it generates crowds. And what's happening here in the text with Jesus is he's doing this covert reason. Again, he's not lying. It's not like Jesus just lied right now. Look at verse 11. Because the Jews sought him at the feast and said, where is he? Because again, they see his posse and crew, then clearly Jesus has to be nearby. But he's not doing this as an act of deception. It was an attempt to avoid unwelcome publicity and harm and hostility. The Jews who sought him were the antagonistic ones that had a problem with Jesus. And more than likely, the enemies of Jesus, they're looking for him. Okay, there's the guys. But where's Jesus? Because they know that this is the purpose. We're going to arrest him. We're going to kill him. And the reason why I know this, look at verse 12. There was so much complaining among the people concerning him. Some said, he's good. Others said, no, on the contrary, he deceives the people. The people who thought Jesus was good are probably the ones that saw the miracles, heard the teachings, watched the healings take place. And I can imagine the ones who are influenced by the religious leaders are the ones that are like, nope, he's a deceiver, he's a fake, he's a phony. But it's interesting to me that the people who were arguing about Jesus were arguing on the basis of his character. He's a deceiver. No, he's not. He's good. And I want you guys to understand something concerning the faith right now. There is no middle ground between the two. There's no middle ground. Either one is true or one isn't. Either Jesus is telling the truth about himself or he's the biggest liar, and everything we're doing right now is for nothing. And Jesus is the one who said it. You are either for me or you are against me. There's no riding the fence. There's no like, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, either Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, or he isn't. There's no middle ground. And you can imagine as these two people are arguing with one another, debating over his character, I want you to notice the people saying this are the ones saying it discreetly. Verse 13, and then we'll land this ship here. However, no one spoke openly of him for fear of the Jews. They're genuinely worried about either their reputation or even their safety. And I want to remind you of a verse that the Bible says, that God says, if you confess me before men, I will confess you before the Father. If the sole purpose of Christians is you are light, you are salt, we have this conflict now. That sounds great in church. We're in a comfortable place, but we have to leave here eventually and fulfill our role. That means you're going to find conflict. That means you're going to meet people that disagree with you. Some of you don't like confrontation. Some of you oddly like it enough that you need help. But anyways, but the point that I'm trying to make is that you have a conflicting issue both then and now, that people who actually want to embrace Jesus, but I want to be in the middle. You're either for him or you're against him. You either represent the truth or you misrepresent the truth. In fact, I'm going to invite the worship team to come up because there's more I want to say, but I want to kind of wrap this up so that I can help you guys think what I've been thinking as I was studying. There are people who have notions about Jesus. And I feel like until you, and this is why I always encourage people that are questioning Jesus, read the Gospel of John. Start off with the Gospel of John. Because what I've noticed, when I first became a Christian, I read through this book, and even some of my preconceived notions about Jesus was shattered. And I know now, Jesus is not a deceiver. James in his little epistle says that God cannot be tempted beyond evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. Like he's incapable of evil. I don't think he's deceiving us. But at the same time, we know that he's more than good, which he is. We know he is God, the bread of life, the one who's going to be persecuted, killed, but rise again. And over again, Jesus is indicating this to them. And over again, we see people reject the things that he's saying and even reject that he could be the Messiah. He's the carpenter's kid from Nazareth. There's no way. And if there's any source of encouragement I can give you guys, we live in a time where you give your opinion and you're canceled. You're destroyed. And I stand by what I've always said, that the pulpit is not a political platform for you to understand my political orientation, and I need to stand by that. I need to stand by the truth of the gospel and protect truth when it is being destroyed. I need to unashamedly stand for what is right, not because it's my political duty, but because it is my responsibility as a follower of Jesus now to represent who he is. He is the light of the world. He is the bread of life, and he's given me, of all people, the privilege to have the most important message ever to show people that the gospel can change, and I don't need to be persuasive in doing it. Jesus loves you, and he died for you, and he proved his love for you time and time again. And for those of you that have been struggling with that notion, this is the moment that I think the Lord wants you to know that he hasn't given up on you. And it's hard for us to kick against the goads. And isn't God so good, even in our persistence to reject him, that he reveals his truth over and over again?